to have you here. And to start off with, I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions of my own because I'm nosy. What was it that actually got you interested and started in theater and acting to begin with?
In 1967, I was a student at San Francisco State University. We invited a very extraordinary poet and writer out named Amiri Baraka, who's Leroy Jones, to start with a education theater project, which included dance, theater, and it's a community project. And his presence galvanized the community itself and brought various artists together. And so I was a student there and a member of the Black Student Union who had facilitated this coming out there. And so that's the first time I ever done theater. I was 20 years old. I had never been on stage before in my life. Not even a little small, maybe something of a small Christmas play at church or something. And so I did some theater, and then after I finished, after I graduated, I stopped doing theater, and I started working. I worked in community development and in the office in San Francisco, out of the mayor's office, 1971. And so it was one of those kind of jobs, exciting, you know. I was looking for something to kind of find a way to relax or something like that. And I started doing improvisation. I ended up in the American Conservatory of Theater in 1975 at a night program. And then from there, I did theater in San Francisco, which was very vibrant at the time. Places like the Magic Theater and other theaters, Eureka Theater, very vibrant theater. Like a lot of, you know, I did Sam Shepard, Suicide and B Flat. I did this is a lot of theater, and then ended up in. But mainly the key was really that I found a writer who wrote for me, and he was a South African writer named Ethel Fugard. So not only was the work that I did, he taught me the craft of acting, but also taught me. It also gave me a process in which I was able to say what was important to me in the world and whose side of the world I was on. And it was just at the crescendo of the anti-apartheid movement, which led me to end up doing Mandela in 1986, and even becoming a good friend of Nelson Mandela as well. So I think that part of it was the fact that I felt that the work that I had to do in some ways had to be purposeful. And that was the main thing that pushed me forward in there. And that for me, it had value. I said, this had value. So often I refer to myself as a cultural worker, which means the work that I do, I feel has value.
And of all your philanthropic, I cannot speak today, I'm sorry. Of all your philanthropic or humanitarian activities over the years, is there any one specific one that has really touched you significantly or more deeply than others?
Well, you know, sometimes it's really, I always make the statement, this is what I do tomorrow, what's important, not what I did in the past. But I think for me, when I was a student and we were all talking about an end to the system of apartheid, it wasn't on people's radar screen. And to know that throughout my life, throughout my young adult life, that I had some vision that perhaps we could struggle enough, fight enough, and present the argument enough that the system of apartheid would end and that Nelson Mandela would be free. So I think out of all the things that you were able to say that were part of my life, that I was right in the middle of, whether it was through my work as an artist, whether it was through my work in various organizations, meeting men and women who were in exile and couldn't go home, and to see them go home, to be home, go home after years and years and years. I know people who had been able to go to South Africa with 20, and they were able to go home. And I think if you were to say the signature thing in my life that I was glad I was involved in, and the great Paul Robeson once said that every generation makes its own history and is judged by the history it made. And so I think all the things that involved, whether it was being a child of the civil rights movement and being able to watch my parents mature and grow as a process to that, and also to be involved in issues around social justice, whatever they've been, and particularly around the end of apartheid was something that I'm very proud that I was there, present at the time when that happened.
We're going to start taking questions from the audience here in just a sec. I just have one last one because it's one of my favorite films. Lethal Weapon was one of your most popular films in your earlier career, and you really seem to have an amazing chemistry with your co-stars. Was the making of the Lethal Weapon films as much fun off camera as it looked like it was? Because you seem to be like really getting along well.
Oh man, it was so wonderful to work with Mel Gibson, and I love Mel. Mel is such a great friend of mine, and to be able to work with him because there's a level of just, I think, sometimes you don't see his work, but there's a level of genius and ingenuity there and generosity. So when all those things meet in one time, you have it's just a great time working. And each time that whenever I think about Lethal Weapon and Dick Donner and everything, someone said they had just met Dick Donner, and a big smile came on my face. They came up to my table. And it's because of that, and I mean, it was really great to work in, to bring Joe in, and everyone who was added to the cast at any time. It was just really, really wonderful. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, it was certainly the most successful part of my career, and it also allowed me to do some other things, like To Sleep with Anger, a movie I did, or The Saint of Fort with Charles Burnett directing, or The Saint of Fort Washington, a movie about two homeless men that I did with Matt Dillon, and other things that it kind of like became the focal point because it was a franchise film, and then at the time I had a great agent too. Arnold Rifkin, man, who's like a brother to me. We're almost exactly the same age, and we went through the same, but he was my agent, and he would fight for me, in ways. I mean, really fight for me and try to find to leverage something else, because he represented Bruce Willis, he represented Stallone, and everything else, and Whoopi, so he was always leveraging, something for me, and that was that. But those were, to be able to have that kind of franchise film. I remember the second one, which was about, laundering Cougar rights. The film, in a sense, it was banned from South Africa, so they would show it in South Africa. So on one hand, we do a popular film, a film that certainly with this the first one out suggested that it's going to be there would be a sequel. We do a popular film, and it's banned from South Africa. You don't get better than that, I mean, really, in a sense, We're not talking about the word having value, and feeling that your work has value, in a sense, right. And it was inherent value in Lethal Weapon as well, because there were other morals to the story, whether it's drugs in the first one, or whether it's South Africa in the second one, or whether it's proliferation of guns in the community in the third one, or immigration in the fourth one. So on the one hand, there was some sort of general overriding theme beyond just the action and the humor, in a sense, But the way in which I think the writers, Joel Silver, one of the producers, and also Dick Donovan, were able to kind of put these together in some sort of cogent way, in some sort of way that may have allowed people to enjoy themselves as a movie experience, but also come out feeling something else as well.
All right, and I see there's quite a few of you out there that are itching to ask him some questions, so let's start over here on this side of the room. And your name?
My name's Hannah.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Glover.
How you doing? Good.
Great, thank you. I have a question about Lonesome Dove and your work as Dietz.
I'm sorry, question about what?
About Lonesome Dove and your work as Dietz. And I wanted to know what drew you to that role, and then if you wanted to share an interesting story about the filming with us.
Well, it's interesting because I did Lonesome Dove in 1988. I think we started shooting at the beginning of 1988. And it's certainly one of the great miniseries of all time, And even though Dietz didn't have a lot to say, there was something, I was kind of building a storyline around Dietz. And I think the storyline I built around Dietz was that he was a black Seminole Indian. And if you know a little bit of history about black Seminole Indians, they made their way after the agreement with the U.S. government after 3 wars. The Seminole Indians had 3 wars, starting in 1816, 3 wars that lasted over a period of about 30-something years, 3 different wars. After that war came, General Jackson, the president, Zachary Taylor, the president, and Colonel Dade County came out of the war. And so I made him a black Seminole Indian, because after they made an agreement and went to Oklahoma and places, they fled because the agreement it was not upheld. They fled across the Rio Grande and worked for Santa Anna's government until after the Emancipation Proclamation. Then they came back over the Rio Grande, and you see plaques all around Texas where they became scouts for the Texas Rangers and for the U.S. Army as well. So that's where I figured out Dietz was a black Seminole Indian who had come back to, because he had a different kind of consonance about himself, And I was able to use the form of that idea when I did Buffalo Soldiers for TNT, and made John Horse, which is a traditional name for black Seminole Indian. John Horse had some of the same kind of history as Dietz did as well. And I think the movement of that, it's just what I felt like that everyone in that film, from every single one, from what's my man's name? Every single character belonged in that film. Every single person who played in that film belonged in that film. They looked like they belonged in the film. There's a wonderful coffee table photograph book that was taken by the screenwriter who adapted the play. And it's really beautiful about what it was to shoot on that film, And there were great stories, There was a lot of, Robert Duvall is his own person, what I'm saying? And you have all these different energies and everything else. But I tell you, man, it was such a really wonderful experience to be, and I guess that scene at the end, is really special. I use that term. I said black Seminole. My grandma is part Choctaw, so there's a Native American blood that runs through my veins as well. Yeah.
All right. And what is your question, sir?
My name is Patrick, and my question is, what is your best memory of Angels in the Outfield?
Your best memory of Angels in the Outfield?
Oh, God, it was, it's the best memory I have, Patrick, and I knew this was going to be a special film, was after it was released, after about, it came into theaters, and I'm talking about 1995. So this next year will be the 20th year of its release. That's when it came out, just in the All-Star game from 1995. And I live in San Francisco, and I was in the supermarket shopping, and I was in the vegetable and fruit department, and as I passed by, a young boy about your age looked up at me and whispered to his mother, "Mom, there's the coach." So I think the best memory is the impact that it had. And another memory, I went to an event. First I went to 2 events. One event was, these are students at Boston University, and they invited me to speak there about, just to speak. I think it was a student event there. And so a group of the students came up to me and said, "Mr. Glover, would it be all right, would you be offended," these are college students, "would you be offended if when you came on stage, we all got up in the audience and did the wave?" Which they actually did. When I was in Nashville, Tennessee, I was speaking at the National Association of Collegiate Activities, which are all students. Now, to tell you the impact this film had, these were all college students who would decide who they wanted to bring on their campus to speak. And there were about 800 or 900 of them. And when I came in, and I was announced to come in, they got up in the audience and all of them did the wave. So those are my best memories of it. The impact that it had on people, the fact that's, my grandson has seen it a couple of times. He's 10 years old. And then young people like you still look at it. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Candace, and it's an honor to meet you, sir. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I was introduced to your Western genre only about 3 years ago. So I knew the lighter side, Angels in the Outfield, Maverick, that kind of thing. And I fell in love with you all over again when I started seeing these Westerns on Encore. So I was just wondering, out of all the genres you've done, I guess which one is your top pick?
Well, it's hard to be, when I was Patrick's age, young man's age, when I came up, I grew up on Westerns. So there's always, you grew up playing cowboys, and there's always a sensibility to that, I mean, they're favorite Westerns that I have that I could look at over and over and over again, like Paul Newman in Hombre. I love that one with Richard. And one of my favorite series of all time was Have Gun Will Travel with Richard Boone. You know what I'm saying? So there you go. I know we got some happy with the classic running, but so I grew up on Westerns. Rifleman is on television, or you could go on and on and on and on and on. So the opportunity to get on a horse and play in a Western, there's a whole different other kind of perspective when you're on a horse, in a sense, and if you get a chance to do it, I mean, Deese and that white horse he had on, I remember in Silverado, I had 3 horses that I was riding every day for 6 months, almost, just about every day for 6 months when I did Silverado, man. And I have my 3 horses, they all look the same, but I knew which one with Give Me the Best, you know, the one was the runner, you know, and it was beautiful. It's beautiful, you know. And I remember before we started, we had about 4 weeks of rehearsal, and when I picked up that Henry rifle, I almost broke my arm. It was so heavy, you know. I would stand in my room, and I would use it as a kind of like pumping iron or something like that. On this hand, and this hand, and this hand, and this hand. But there's something so romantic about that, you know, about doing a Western. And it's a part of that. And I did a lot of research, you know, about Westerns, you know, and particularly black people in the West, you know, because Lawrence Kasdan came up to me and said, when after he saw Places in the Heart, we had a screening of Places in the Heart in early 1984, and Lawrence Kasdan came up to me and said he was going to do a Western, and he wanted a black hero in it. He didn't say a black Western, he said a Western with a black hero in it. And I did a lot of research on the West and what it really looked like, you know. In fact, before the 1920s, America's primary contribution to world literature was the Western novel. And so, I mean, it's just a Western novel. And in that place, in that space that the Western novel created, you saw all kinds of people in it, whether it's Chinese, Jews, African Americans, and all Mexicans and everything. They populated the real West. They were more than just, you know, Randolph Scott and John Wayne. You know what I'm saying? His images in the West. You know, so I think that there's the opportunity to do that and understand the West in a different way. You know, and to do that was one of the great things that came out of that as well.
Awesome.
You have one more question?
Yeah, my second question is actually something I'm stealing from some Bravo interviews I had seen, and I've adapted it a little bit because I have had a little crush on you. I wanted to know, as maybe one of your favorite characters, what would be the best thing he might say to a young woman or lady?
Well, is one of my favorite characters. You know, it's funny because when people say, what's the movie that you like the most that you've done? You know, it always be Places in the Heart. Simply, yes, because it was my first major role, but also my work is dedicated to my mother. And some things happened in such a way. I was living in New York in April of 1983, and I came home to San Francisco, and I was spending time with my mother, and I was spending time with my mom and dad. And my mom was just, man, she was just amazing, my mom. You know, and I remember the first time my mom saw me on an act, she came backstage with, son, in a little small community theater, the people said you can act. It was so, it was so precious. It was so, that's how she was. Yeah, well, she'd always like to take me in and say, oh, what you mean, my son Danny? He's an actor. You know what I'm saying? But she said, you're going to do a movie in September that's going to change your life. And it's going to be about you. And I took that in. And I remember getting Places in the Heart, the script. And it was in the empty room on my agent's floor. And I was sitting on the floor reading the script. And everything in that film resonated about memory and everything else. Because I have this kind of, in some sense, I had this kind of dual lives, where parallel lives that coincide with each other, or that just intersect with each other. My mom was born in rural Georgia to farmers, mother and father who were sharecroppers when they were married, tenant farmers. And eventually, because my grandmother, her mother was a midwife, they eventually would save up money and bought their own farm. And my mother always, with a moral, part of my moral underpinning was my mother said that she would always be eternally grateful for her mother and father because she didn't pick cotton in September, she went to school in September. That's a sea shift. So hypothetically, you could say that I'm sitting here in front of you today because my mother didn't pick cotton in September. She graduated from college in 1942, migrated to New York after teaching a year of school, and then met my dad, and they ended up in San Francisco at the end of the war, where he was discharged, and they stayed. So those are kind of mixed. So I had this very, very close relationship with my grandparents. My mother would go and see them all the time. In fact, when I was like 2 years old, I lived with my grandparents from the time that I was, from the time I was 6 months old to 3 years old, I lived with my grandparents. And on that farm was my grandfather's 90-something-year-old mother, who was born in 1853 and was freed by the Emancipation Proclamation during the time I was there. So, on the one hand, those are the kind of what I call, I think I talk a great deal about psychic history or emotional history and everything. So those are part of my emotional life. So when I read the script, I said, Mom, I think this is the movie. And I said, it reminds me in my images, the images remind me of my grandfather, your father, my grandfather. And the images remind me of so many things that I have, they're visceral. I mean, they're part of my, they're subconscious rather. They're subconscious, they're stuff I feel. And, I felt a long time in my life, and the images there remind me of that. Well, my mother, on the day that I received the information that I was going to do the movie, my mother died in an automobile accident on her way back home to see her mother and father. And so it was while it's the most traumatic thing, I had the rare opportunity that we get as an artist to how you, I would say, to contribute something or to say something about, this woman I was incredibly in love with, my mom. And to be able to say that in my work. So I said out loud, I told you that story, and all to say is that, in some sense, find something that's connected to you. That was, in some sense, Robert Benton didn't know he was going to select me for that role. He didn't know he was going to do that. But in some way, the role came to me in such a way, and it gave me an opportunity to pay homage to my mother. It gave me an opportunity to pay not only homage to them, but when my grandfather saw it, he said, "Boy, he forgot he was 90-something. Well, what you know about picking cotton?" I said, "Grandpa, I was out there getting in your way out there in the cotton field when I come down. When I would come down there to see you and everything. At least I got out of the way. I was there trying to bust over to one of those watermelons and eat the heart out of it and feed it to the hogs, you know what I'm saying?" But those are the kind of things that certainly where when I say that all those kind of things make up me. I'm totally community-based. I've lived in the Haight-Ashbury since I was 11 years old. I live about 10 blocks away from where I grew up as a kid, near Golden Gate Park. And I've been, that's basically me, So in some sense, I found a way in which I could use art to frame my relationship with this business, and at the same time to try to live my life. Hello.
My name is Angela, and I've grown up watching your movies, and I want to thank you. Sorry. My name is Angela, and I've grown up watching your movies, and I want to thank you for your work. The Color Purple and Silverado are probably my favorite movies. My question is about Silverado. I know you talked about this a little bit already, but what is your favorite or best memory of working with such a phenomenal cast in that movie?
Well, I just working with the cast themselves, you know. I remember Larry has this kind of tone. It's almost like a monotone in his voice. It's always a nasal kind of in his. He talks like kind of has a nasal effect when he speaks. But Larry would say, man, there are a lot of great actors, but there's only a few you can live with for 6 months. So I think all of that, you know, the moments were just working out something, rehearsing, and doing something on a daily basis, you know. I mean, it was 6 months. I mean, 6 months that we went in New Mexico shooting that. And it was a great experience, you know. It was just a wonderful experience, you know. The stuff that came out of that, the movie itself, and then, you know, the publicity, the touring, the Columbia, put a lot of energy and resources into. So every moment was, you know, we worked together, we ate together, and then when on Saturday night, because we're working 6 days a week on that film. You know, actors would pitch, you know, they get angry because they work 6 days a week now, but worked 6 days a week on that film. And just everything on that film was just really, and it was, you felt like you were doing something special, basically.
It was, so thank you very much.
You know, I mean, that's the good thing about it. Sometimes when you do something, like I remember the first Lethal Weapon, you just felt like you were doing something special. And primarily it was a relationship between Mel and Dick Donald, the director, and myself. That's what made it so special.
Thank you.
We have another gentleman over here.
What was your other favorite role?
Well, for other favorite role, I mean, the other favorite role for me, perhaps, Places in the Heart. And you have to put Lethal Weapon in there. There's so many, it's so hard to say. But a film that I had as much fun doing for other reasons was Predator 2. And there's an interesting story around that too, because I was in Chicago doing a play at Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago doing a play, and I received 3 other scripts, and one of the scripts was somebody who played a pimp. And based upon all the commotion around The Color Purple, I couldn't play a pimp. That was not going to be my next role, even though it was I think a brilliant role, you know, I could have done something with it, but I just couldn't play a pimp. The other one was about a high school teacher. And the third one I got was the role in Predator 1. And I couldn't read that either. I couldn't play that anyway because there's a scene in it, if you remember Predator 1, where Carl Weathers become very violent with the woman in Predator 1. And so I couldn't do anything. When I got to Chicago was what you saw, what you would call central station for all discussion around Color Purple. Wherever you go, people were talking about Color Purple. Color Purple it is. Everybody was talking about Color Purple. They would have meetings at churches and meetings. What's called purple? I couldn't do anything. I wouldn't want to do anything that involved me mishandling a woman. That's the first off. And then after that came Lethal Weapon. After I turned those other three things down, then came Lethal Weapon. And so when Predator 2 came along, and I was shooting Flight of the Intruder in Hawaii, and Predator 2 came along, and my agent called me, I mentioned Arnold Ruffin called me and said, hey man, don't jump into conclusions, but we're going to do Predator, they're going to do Predator 2. Arnold's not going to do it. And they want you to be offering it to you with the same writers, the same groups, everybody's in it. Everybody who did the first one, who worked behind the scenes, writers, technicians, everything, special effects guy, we're going to be in this one. So I said, let's go. And I totally did, you could say, I stay pretty healthy and fit. I exercise a great deal. In fact, you know, I was in the gym this morning, but I do a lot of cardio stuff. And at that time, I could still like run 4 miles on the sand in the beach. So I was working out, and I had never lifted weights before. And so I got a trainer, we lift weights and everything else, and Predator 2, man. I wasn't gonna get as big as Arnold, but I can service my own frame, you know. And so I was feeling great, man, you know. I was feeling like I was the man, yeah. And it's something that's something about acting too, because once you become immersed in the character, you become the character, you know. And I call it this process of immersion. And whether you're on stage or whether you're doing film, there's a process that you go through as an actor where you become, in essence, you become centered. You become the character, and you become, within the framework of the film, indistinguishable. So when I did that, so that was great, you know. Beloved was interesting, was fascinating for me, because I think it's probably the most important film I've done, Beloved, because of what the story it tells. Now, if you saw 12 Years a Slave, watch that and you can probably go back and look at Beloved and get another sense of that. You know, in the sense that what the system itself, the pain, the guilt, the fear, and anger, all that stuff, in a sense, the system of slavery represented as well.
Okay, and you have a question?
Yes, I do. My name is Erin, and my first impression of you was in The Color Purple. And I thought you were a scary person until I saw Lethal Weapon and then saw all of them, and it was a running thing with my friends and I. But the question I have is, do you have a favorite book that kind of changed your perspective on a certain subject or your life or something like that?
I don't know if it's singular, you know. I think in life you often find yourself in let's say in a thoughtful, evolving life, in most ways, which most majority of us live. You know, whether we find things to reinforce our beliefs, we find things to steer us in a particular direction. There are books throughout at each particular stage in my development. These books have allowed me to do that, you know. Since I'm trained as an economist, the early books for me were books around economics, you know, whether it's political economics and everything else. And reading those books, study those books, were the things that further governed the first part of my life. And often they're often associated with various elements, centered around change, you know. If you ask me what's in my bag of books that I carry with me, one of the things that's always with me, and I would say that is always reinforcing me, is that I have a couple of books on Martin Luther King speeches. I have at least 2 books in my bag right now, and some bookmark right now. So at some point in time, I'll read that as something in clarifying, or something reflective in some sense, because his words are simply prophetic, and not only were important at the time of his death more than 45 years ago, but I think they resonate now as well. So if there's one particular thinker that certainly at one particular point in time that I do that, Martin Luther King, I just wrote, a great friend of mine just died about 3 weeks ago, Vincent Harding, and he was he's 82 years old, he was a primary speech writer for Martin Luther King, and I always used to talk with him, think about him, because he's written some extraordinary stuff on King and everything else. So if you're reading King, you're going to read Gandhi, you're going to read those kind of things, those the books that in some sense attempt to try to kind of shape the way who you are. You know, this is my 50th year I graduated from high school. I spoke at about 2 high school graduations, you know, and offered, you know, and I thought about in the conversation, I think about my own movement, my own evolution from that process, you know, and books become that for me. I just happen to be, you know, books and articles, you know. I'm fascinated by education and the ideas around education, you know, and around there, and I still read various books around economics, you know, situations, thinkers around that, you know. A friend of mine who's an economist just gave me the title of a new book I can't wait to get into, you know, and so, yeah.
Oh, and then one other question: are there any plans for you doing anything for Oprah for the master class?
No, she has a master class?
Well, yeah, it's like it's a show on OWN. It's called Master Class, and she has all the, like, she had Morgan Freeman and Whoopi Goldberg, and
oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's something.
No, oh, that's great. That's great. I didn't hear about it. It's the first I heard about it.
Just curious.
All right. Thank you.
Great question over here.
Hello, Mr. Goldberg. My name's Danny also. Thank you for all your great work. Question, something in regards to one of your other really challenging roles from kind of like Predator 2, that of Lethal Weapon 4. I just wanted to know, I just have an interest in, was it brutally challenging working with Jet Li? With all the various fighting scenes, including the showdown, any painful moments, amusing anecdotes?
Oh man, in fact, he's the sweetest man. He just has a beautiful heart, man. And it was fun. I mean, Jet Li was about 35 then, so. But they say when he was younger, he was much quicker than. I can't imagine that, boy. It was something very special to watch, you know, and to be a part of, you know. But the beautiful thing about it is that, you know, all the stuff that we did underwater and all the stuff that seems like it's on the pier, that was on Warner Brothers set. It was not in San Pedro. At 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You know what I'm saying? It was not in San Pedro. And so what happened is that dig down there, we all have been just tired of doing night shooting. You know, that first part of Lethal Weapon 4 where I'm in the shorts, well, that's shot, and that's a night shot. But we were all tired of doing night shooting. And Dick Donald did not like doing night shooting. So he had to, Warner Bros. Built a tank, which that tank must have been about 15 feet high with water in it. And we shot everything under there. Shot everything on the set. We had massage therapists, and people were stretching us and everything else like that. So it was beautiful. It was wonderful about that. You know, we get to the set at 7 and we leave by 7. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to start by thanking you for Lethal Weapon. They don't make movies like that anymore, and they've tried many times and haven't got it right. But my question's about Predator 2. I know that you said Arnold passed on the second one, and they turned the reins over to you, which you took really well. But I was wondering, I know Arnold likes to turn everything into a competition, so have you seen Arnold since Predator 2, and how did he feel about you taking the reins from him on that?
I mean, Arnold and I would see each other quite often because we're both involved in Planet Hollywood. He was cool with it, but there's no problem with it. He had moved on, you know what I'm saying? No, he had moved on, you know. I'm glad it was available to do, you know. I'm just surprised that how many people have come to me with with you know, wanting a picture or talking about Predator 2, you know. It's a great line, Julius, you know what I'm saying? Some of them we can't pronounce. We can't offer to the audience because of the language, but you know, someone just gave you one today, you know, and that's honey. She gave me a line saying, "Hunting predators." I don't know, hunting predators is hard work, you know. Or who's next? All right, who's next? Okay, it's a great stuff, man. That's all right. Sometimes you get the best line, Silver out. I don't want to kill you, and you don't want to be dead. It was a great line. That's a great line. I don't want to kill you, and you don't want to be dead.
All right, and we have a question over here.
Hello, my name is Andrea, and I wanted to do this for my mother. She's actually in the back. She's too shy to come up and say hi to you and stuff. Her name's Susan. But I do want to ask, during your career, you played a lot of authority figures. And I was wondering, is there ever a point in your career where you felt that you were typecast?
Then I thought I was what?
Typecast?
Well, I don't think, I think there was a point in my career when I was always casted as, most of the time, someone who was as older than I really am, you know. And that happens now. Somebody wanted me to play some role when I was 92. I said, well, that's a little stretch right now. You know, man. That was a little stretch for me, you know. But, you know, when I did the first Lethal Weapon, I was 39. I'm playing 50, you know. And that's always been the MO for me, you know, in some sense. But I remember the first play I did in 1967, I was 20, and I was playing the father of a teenage girl. So I think that's kind of like started, it had its roots beginning way back, yeah. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Anna. I'm just wondering if you have any tips for aspiring actors. You've been in so many different genres. I mean, you worked with a guy in a Predator suit, and you've made people sob, and I just want to know if you have a certain method to getting back and forth.
There's something about acting in some way that that I think transcends genres, you know, in terms of your preparation. You know, there's a way in which I think, I mean, for example, I did a movie called Switchback, and where I played a serial killer. So I read everything about serial killers. And the FBI has a special section around serial killers. And the stuff that you learn is phenomenal because they never catch the A guys or the A+ guy. You know, the guys they catch are like the guys who are B-, you know, guys. I'm giving them a grade. So when I worked on the film, I tried to figure out where I can ground, and he uses this word immerse, where I can ground the character. From theater, you learn to ground the character in some sort of physical action, or the physical something, physicality of it, whatever, you know. If your feet hurt during the whole play, then the character's whole emotional life is situated in his feet. You know what I'm saying? So I remember when I did Switchback, and I was trying to find something to center the character. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was saying that his Qigong master could knock you over from across the room. Literally knock you over. His Qi, the word Qi was so powerful. His Qi was so powerful. So I'm up in the Rockies here, and then I started, for some reason, I decided I wanted to take Pilates. Now in 1995, you know, not a lot of men were taking Pilates. You know, and it was so I went to this place and I started taking Pilates. And I felt something happening with me. I felt something happening with my body, in where my body became centered in a certain way, and my movement became centered in a certain way. So, and usually what I'll do is also part of my preparation, is that I'll have some sort of music or something that I identify. In this case, it's a really beautiful piece, standard by John Coltrane, called Equinox. So I centered everything around here. So I've had, in my trailer, I've been playing Equinox. Da-da-da, bum, 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 da-da-da, bum, dum, dum, da-da-da, bum, dum, dum, doo-doo. So I would play that in my trailer, and I was taking Pilates. So I found that's where I wanted my body to be. I found the kind of ease where I want my body, the ease of move. And the guy he was a cowboy, you know what I'm saying? So I began to center it. Sometimes I'll do that, and I'll center it around the beloved, was around the clothes. Every single piece of clothes I had its own story, and I made the story itself. So everything else, I took this off this dead man. I took this off this. I found these shoes. I did every single thing. Everything. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll try to do that. Center the character. So whatever he does, whatever action he does, whether it's comedy or whether it's physical action or whatever, I'm able to kind of find the center of it. And I think I learned that. That was a word lesson I learned in theater, and I also learned in dance as well, because when I did movement, you know, somebody just mentioned Morgan Freeman. No, Morgan Freeman used to be in a dance troupe early on. So in movement, what I did was I found some way of regulating or being able to kind of organize my body. You know, and I'm like 6'3", over 6'3", so I'm trying to find some way to make my body feel comfortable with my body, and that's the key to it. So, and the key to that is acting, I think, the key to acting is listening, and the key to listening is relaxing, because you can't listen if you're not relaxed. So all of the kind of things that I employ at some point in terms of centering the character and finding the character and everything, sometimes they come spontaneous, you know, in some sort of way, and places in the heart. I know what it felt like. All I had to do was recall in my past memory what it felt like being around the farm, what it felt like, you know, that moment in time, you know, for me, you know, something that I call on that. So, but the key is that whatever you find in the actors and actresses here, and I'm sure there are plenty of actors and actresses around here who can give you certainly a lot of valuable information working it. The key is basically trying to find ways in which you use yourself.
Thank you so much.
We just have a quick moment left. Do you have any projects that you're working on that you want to talk about really quick?
Well, I'm working on this film for Paramount right now up in Vancouver, which I have to be there tomorrow night. And it's called, it's one of those big summer movies. It's called Monster Truck. You know, it may be under Formula M, but, you know, they think very highly of it.
Well, good. I look forward to seeing that. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, let's have a big, warm, loving hand for Mr. Johnny Glover. Thank you so much for being here, sir. I hope you have a great time here. We love you, and you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And you all have a fantastic rest of your